Riesending Cave Rescue. On June 7, 2014, an experienced team of cave explorers entered the Riesending Cave, located deep in the Bavarian Alps near the town of Ramsau, Germany. Equipped with hundreds of pounds of gear, they descended into one of the deepest and most complex cave systems in Europe, stretching over 22 kilometers and plunging more than 1,200 meters underground. The team's goal was to reach unexplored sections of the cave, pushing deeper than anyone had gone before. Among them was Johann Westhauser, a veteran scientist and one of the original explorers who helped discover the cave back in 1996. The first stages of the descent went smoothly. They reached the first and second base camps exhausted but determined. Deeper into the cave, the team faced tougher conditions. After nearly 10 hours underground, the team reached a straight passage riddled with loose rocks. Every move had to be deliberate, every foothold tested. As they made their way through, Johann took the lead, cautiously advancing across the unstable ground. Then, disaster struck. Without warning, a rockfall erupted from above. A large boulder crashed down, striking Johann in the head. His helmet shattered. He fell instantly unconscious, crumpling onto the cold stone floor. The others froze, horrified. In shock, the team had to act. One member stayed with Johann, while another made the grueling journey back to the surface to get help. It took 10 hours just to reach the entrance. He called for help. Mountain rescue teams mobilized immediately. Over the next hours, more than 700 rescuers from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and Croatia descended on the site. Specialized teams entered the cave in shifts, establishing a communication system that allowed text messages to pass through the solid rock. Supplies were carefully ferried down through narrow shafts. Then came logistics. The rescue path was over 1,000 meters straight down, a vertical mile. The team had to reinforce sections with new bolts, install rope lines, create footholds, and constantly clear falling debris. But they didn't just plan to reach Johann, they had to get him out, and he couldn't walk. First, 2 cave doctors reached him. Crawling through the darkness for over 12 hours, they finally arrived at his location. He was alive, but concussed, with a fractured cheekbone and possible brain trauma. They stabilized him, gave him fluids, painkillers, and wrapped him tightly to preserve his body heat. Then came the stretcher, a specially designed, shock-absorbing litter made for tight vertical spaces. Rescuers took turns carrying him through each chamber, using ropes, pulleys, and their own bodies to lower or lift him up walls and shafts. After 11 days underground, on June 19, 2014, Johann was finally brought to the surface at 11:44 a.m. He was immediately airlifted to a hospital in Bavaria, where he spent weeks recovering. The rescue cost nearly $1 million, but against impossible odds, Johann survived. Boy Scout Cave Rescue. On December 27, 2003, a group of 8 boys set out for a day trip to the Withlacoochee State Forest, accompanied by 2 counselors. The plan was to fish, but the chilly spring weather shifted their focus to exploring Peace Cave, a cave known for its tight crawlways and sharp twists, though it wasn't considered dangerous. The group arrived at the cave's entrance. It was familiar to them. Most of the cave was easy to navigate, about 50 feet long, with ceilings high enough for a 6-foot person to stand. The counselors, older and larger, couldn't fit through the cave's narrow sections, so they stayed outside, letting the boys explore on their own. Javerick Henderson, 16, and Michael Sharrow, 15, led the others deeper into the cave. Curious and bold, they veered off the main tunnel into a narrow side passage, a section known as the hairpin curve, a brutally narrow twist that forced even the smallest explorers to wriggle through like snakes. The passage was tight, barely wide enough to crawl through. Michael squeezed in first with Henderson behind, but midway through, as Henderson twisted his body to make the turn, he got stuck. Stone against ribs and arms trapped. He couldn't move forward, and he couldn't move back. He was wedged. Michael tried to turn back, but the passage left little room to move. He wedged himself in, trying to help Henderson, but the jagged walls scraped against their skin. An hour passed. Michael, exhausted and cold, collapsed. He lay motionless in the tunnel. Henderson, still stuck, now had to deal with the growing horror of watching his friend go still. The air felt thinner. He cried for help over and over. The other boys, still in the wider section behind them, terrified, ran back to the entrance for help and told the counselors what had happened. The counselors, realizing the boys were missing, called for help immediately. Within minutes, rescuers raced to the scene. With full equipment and experience, they went in fast. When rescuers reached the hairpin curve, the scene was grim. Henderson was conscious, but barely, shaking, slipping in and out of focus, still hopelessly stuck. But Michael was unresponsive. They worked fast, carefully widening the passage with chisels, one echoing strike at a time. The sound bounced through the cave, sharp and urgent. After an hour of delicate work, they pulled Henderson free. Alive but weak, wrapped in blankets, he was carried out through the winding tunnels and rushed to medical care. Then came Michael, still unconscious, his pulse weak. It took 2 more hours to free him, inch by inch. He was carried out and rushed to paramedics waiting outside. Against all odds, both survived. Tham Luang Rescue. On June 23, 2018, 12 boys from the Wild Boar soccer team and their coach set out for a quick adventure in Tham Luang Cave, nestled in the lush, rugged hills of northern Thailand. Aged 11 to 16, and Ake, their 25-year-old assistant coach, led them after soccer practice. They carried only flashlights, some water, and snacks. No rain gear, and no plan for trouble. The cave was familiar, a sign warned of flash floods, but the monsoon wasn't due for weeks. Ake figured they'd be in and out in an hour. The boys ditched their bikes and bags at the entrance, stepping into the cool, dark chambers. T, Ake's 16-year-old assistant, led the way until they hit a T-junction. He froze. He'd forgotten the route. Meanwhile, monsoon rain came early, sudden and violent. Water poured into the limestone cave system, flooding chambers and cutting off exits. Within hours, the boys were trapped deep inside, over 2 miles from the entrance. Darkness closed around them. They were lost. Water roared in. A flash flood, sudden and merciless. Outside, a park worker spotted their bikes and cleats. Alarmed, he called in army rangers. Parents gathered, shouting into the void. Rescue teams were summoned immediately, but the cave fought them at every turn. Flooded tunnels blocked access, zero visibility underwater. The rescuers couldn't even get a few hundred meters inside. Days passed. International help arrived. Elite cave divers from the UK, Australia, men like Rick Stanton and John Valanthan, they traveled thousands of miles to reach the scene, carrying their custom gear and decades of experience. The plan was grimly simple. Find them first, then figure out how to get them out. On July 2nd, after 9 days trapped in darkness, 2 British divers finally located the boys. They found them perched on a rocky ledge above the floodwaters, miraculously alive, weak but breathing. The boys huddled together for warmth. Finding them was one thing, getting them out would be another. The rescue teams faced an impossible task. The boys couldn't dive. Most of them didn't even know how to swim. The flooded tunnels were over a mile long with tight choke points, jagged rocks, and strong currents. Even experienced divers could barely make it through without panic setting in. One Thai Navy SEAL, Saman Gunan, died while placing air tanks along the route, running out of oxygen himself. The rescue leaders devised a desperate plan. Each boy would be sedated with ketamine to keep them unconscious during the dive. One diver would guide each boy through the tunnels, tethered together by rope and oxygen lines. It was dangerous beyond belief. If a boy's mask slipped, if he woke up and panicked, he could drown instantly. But there was no other way. On July 8th, the mission began. Divers entered the cave at dawn. Slowly, carefully, they transported the first group through submerged chambers, squeezing them through narrow gaps barely wider than a person's body. It took hours to move just a few hundred meters. When the first 4 boys emerged alive, the crowd outside erupted in cheers. Hope returned, but they were only halfway there. Over the next 2 days, the operation continued. More boys brought out, one by one. On July 10th, the last 4 boys and their coach were finally pulled from the cave. The rescuers emerged exhausted, battered, some barely able to stand, but alive. Against impossible odds, all 13 survived.